Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so tonight we're going to continue on our discussion on the creation of the moon. We have covered for the past lectures the creation of the solar system itself, and before that the creation of the sun, and we already have discussed on the possible origin of our sun, which is from another star who had exploded, right, billions of years ago, might be 5 billion years ago, we don't know, right? But there's a possibility. Everything is a possibility because we really do not have a direct evidence, right? So the possibility, the most probable origin of our sun is from a dead star, and our solar system also came from the dead star. So then after that, it create together and form planets. There were many, many planets, more than 8 planets. But then during the early formation of the solar system, this is just a recap of what we have discussed before. During the early formation of the solar systems, all these planets, right, they collided among each other because, things were not stabilized. So gravitational tug, gravitational push, gravitational pull. So there were so many collisions, and ultimately what left were just these 8 planets that we know right now, right? They were failed planets, those asteroid belts, right, between Mars and also Jupiter. These asteroid belts, right, were believed to be the remnants of a failed planet, a planet that could not be formed, or a planet that was a very small planet that was formed, but then somehow rather was destroyed, either by collision or by the gravitational pull of both planets, Mars and Jupiter, and these planets in between. So many possibilities. Whatever it is, right, scientists try to eliminate the least probable causes, and then what left was those most probable causes. Okay, now let's move on to the moon. The strange thing is this: our planet, the Earth, right, is a third planet from the sun. It's a third rocky planet. We have Mercury, we have Venus, but both Mercury and Venus, both of them do not have any moon, not even a single moon. So our planet, Earth, is the start of all planets after that have moons. So our planet is the first planet that have a moon, then followed by by Mars. Mars has 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos, a very small rocky moon, not rounded shape, just like our moon, beautiful rounded shape. And then after that, we move on to Jupiter, and from Jupiter onwards, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, all these giant gaseous planets, they have lots of moons, tens of moons. So they have more than 40 moons, or maybe 50 moons, because we're still discovering new moons, right, that have been captured by these huge planets. So the strange thing is that we are the first planet that has a moon, right? And then the final planetoid, we call it Pluto. Pluto is not a real planet, it's a planetoid, it's a small planet. Pluto has 1 moon, Chiron. The name is Chiron. So whatever it is, right? Let's go back to our Earth. Okay, our feet firmly planted on Earth. So we have 1 big moon. In fact, our moon is almost as big as the planet Pluto. So imagine how small Pluto is. And then that Pluto has another smaller moon, right? Smaller moon that rotates, that orbits around it. So our moon is considered big, huge. Okay, we can consider it on par with the size of the Galilean moons that orbit around Jupiter. That is our moon. Very strange, because if you look at you look at Mars, Mars has only 2 small moons, irregular shape. It's almost as if Mars did not start with any moon, but somehow rather during its billions of years of its existence, it captured 2 asteroids, right? Asteroids, as you know, that Mars, and between Mars and Jupiter, there is an asteroid belt. So there are a lot of asteroids or boulders or rocks, right, that orbit around the sun. So some or rather, two of these huge boulders, or what you call it as asteroid, two of them captured by planet Mars, and they form the moons of planet Mars. But our moon is very unique. In fact, so unique is our moon that the size of our moon relative to the size of the sun, relative means from a distance, the size of our moon is almost as big as the size of the sun. Not the real size. Of course, the real size of the sun is much, much bigger. You know, 1 million Earth can fit in inside the sun, right? But looking from far, the sun is small and the moon is nearer. So relative to position, right? Both sides, moon and sun, they are almost the same. And that is why only on Earth we can observe full eclipse. Full eclipse means that the sun be totally blocked by the moon. So we have a total eclipse. Only on Earth. You can't observe total eclipse or even a annular eclipse, which is called a ring eclipse, anywhere on any other planets on the solar system. Certainly not on Venus and Mercury, because Venus has no moon and Mercury's sun is so huge, right? Nothing can block the sun. And Mercury and Mars is so far off that the sun is very, very small, right? If you look at the sun now from Earth, right? Imagine if you go to Mars, the size of the sun is just like about maybe about 30% to 40% of what we can see the size of the sun from Earth. That's how small, right, the sun is from Mars, because Mars is very far from the sun. And Mars has two small moons, and the moons cannot eclipse the sun. The moon can pass over. You see, you have the sun here, and the moon, the small moon can pass over just like a small pin or like a boulder passing through, right? We don't call it as eclipse, we call it as occultation. The astronomers call it occultation, means the passing of one celestial body, right, over another celestial body, so much so that the light of the background celestial body is being blocked by this passing celestial body. It's called an occultation. So we cannot observe full eclipse. This is the unique thing for people, for citizens of Earth. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ said, right, with regards to eclipse, the Prophet ﷺ said, the eclipses, both, the lunar and the solar eclipses, both are just signs of Allah's greatness for those who want to take heed or take lesson from it. Signs of Allah's greatness. But there are so many signs of Allah's greatness. Why the eclipses, particularly the Prophet ﷺ said these are the signs of Allah's greatness? There are many other celestial phenomena up there, right? The planets, the stars, but Rasulullah ﷺ particularly mentioned eclipse, and it's full eclipse. Ayatan min ayatillah. Yeah, the two signs of many signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because number one, right, particularly that eclipses can only be observed by us, citizens of Earth. You go to other planets, you can't observe the eclipse. So the moon, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in such a unique way that the relative size to the sun, right, is the same as observed by us from Earth. That's number one, very unique. Now, how did the moon form? To answer this question, we need to know how old is the moon. Now, when the astronauts, the Apollo astronauts in 1960s, late 1960s, early 1970s, right, when they went to the moon, and that was the last trip to the moon. After that, no man set foot on the moon anymore. Why? Because it's very, very expensive, okay, to go to the moon. We have other priorities. Now, when they set to the moon and they went back to Earth, they brought along the dust, moon stars, and moon rocks. Why all these moon dust and moon rocks? Because they are particularly very, very important for those scientists, especially the geologists or those who study moon itself, right? To know what is the composition of the moon. You look at the moon, okay, so bright. Of course, the moon has stars. So what is this stars is all about? What is it? What is it composed of? Right? And then the rocks from the moon, right? Is it what is it, a magma rock, or is it a solid rock, a boulder rock? What type of rock is on the moon itself? Because when you look at the moon, you look the surface of the moon, right? Covered with or blotched with a lot of dark patches. You look at this, the picture here, right? So it's not a pretty sight actually, right? So when people describe people, oh, you like a moon, it means that your face is blotched with so many dark patches. Okay? So what are these dark patches? Are they what, lava flowing from the interior of the moon? Are they what, burn areas? Right? And then you look at the moon surface all pockmarked with so many craters, right? As if there's so many bombardments of things on planet on the moon's surface that it cause so many craters. Sometimes you have a big crater, and in between the big crater there are 2 or 3 craters in between. So the big crater came in, then after that, much later, another 2 or 3 craters fell inside that big crater. So you have craters within craters. What are these? So they brought back all these dust and then these boulders and these rocks, moon rocks, and then they analyzed them, scientists analyzed them, and lo and behold, they found out that all these dust and these rocks from the moon, they have the same composition of the dust and the rocks on Earth's surface. It is as if, right, the moon came from Earth. The moon came from Earth. So it is very strange because there were a lot of theories on how the moon was there, how the moon was formed. One of the theories is that there were just like planet Mars, right, a passing planetoid like Pluto passing through, right, the Earth and then captured by Earth gravity, and therefore this planetoid became Earth moons and the moon that we can see up there, right? This is one theory. Another theory is that, well, it is, planets were formed by gases from the exploded star, right? The what do you call it? The primary star that exploded. So all these gases spewed out by the explosion formed together and from planets become planets. And then one of the formation is another small planet in the vicinity of the Earth, and somehow or other these 2 planets become like a twin planets, but one is bigger than the other, so therefore we call the smaller one as moon. So there's another theory, right? Another theory is that the moon actually formed because of collisions between Earth and another celestial body, a planet the size of Mars, right? Or whatever lah. So there was a collision, and then after that, all this debris, right, that were ejected from that collision formed together. Okay, they gel together, they coalesce together, and they form our moon. So which of these 3 theories is the most correct or the most plausible? We don't say the most correct because we do not know, but the most plausible. And for that, we need to go to the moon to bring back all those moon dust and then moon rocks. So all the moon dust and moon rocks, right, they showed that the moon's composition, at least on the surface of it, right, came from Earth, or it is part of the Earth. So therefore, the first 2 theories that the moon came from another planet or celestial body captured by Earth gravity, that theory can be dismissed, because if it is another planet, then there should be no similarities between these 2 objects, celestial objects, Earth and Moon. Just like there's no similarity between Mars and Earth, right? You can't find, right, Earth dust similar in composition, right, as in Mars dust or soil, Mars soil. It's completely different, right? Of course, the basic elements are there, but the composition, the what do you call it, the compound that arise from the mixture of these two elements, right? Different. And the percentages also different. So the first theory can be ruled out. The second theory can also be ruled out because it's essentially said that these are the two separate bodies. They have no interaction between each other. Now, left the third theory that the moon actually came from Earth. Because why? Because of similarities in composition and ratio of compounds that can be found on moon dust and moon rocks and on Earth itself. And then when they age these moon rocks, they put inside the whatever instrument that they have, machines that they have, and they age it using uranium radioactivity, right? Uranium decay. They found out that the moon is about as old as the Earth, which is about 4.4 to 4.3 billion years, plus minus 500,000 years, right? Sorry, 500 million years. So there is always an error there, right? But this around there, average it out, 4.4 billion years old. That is how old is the moon. Now, how old is the Earth? About 4.5 billion years old. That's how old is the Earth. So when they compare these two, then they can't run away, right, from the conclusion that if the moon came from Earth, then that third theory that said there was a collision, that collision, right, collision took place almost as early as the formation of the Earth itself. It might be a few 100 million years after the formation of the Earth, then there was this collision. So some scientists, right, I forgot the name, right, try to calculate, right, what is the mass of the object that hit the Earth, so much so that the moon can be formed from that collision, from the debris that came out from those collision. So the mass of the moon, the mass of the Earth, and then after that, this third body that hit the Earth and produced the moon itself. So how big is that? So he calculated and he found out that it's about the size of planet Mars. Imagine planet Mars hitting Earth. That's number one. Now, number two is that you look at the moon itself. The moon is actually not rotating around the Earth. It's not orbiting around the Earth in a very, what do you call it, regular circle, in a regular angle. So like that if you have, let's say, for example, this Earth, then the moon does not rotate, right, at the center of the Earth itself. No, the moon actually rotates at an angle. It goes up and then it goes down, and then it goes up again, then it goes down again. So it is like, you know, a hula hoop. So it's an angle. So the moon is orbiting around the Earth at an angle from the center of the Earth, which is the, what do you call it, the equator of the Earth, or what do you call it, the hemisphere, the line that divides Earth into two equal parts. So it is slanting that way at an angle of about 5 degrees, right? You see, 5 degrees is not much, but you see the distance between the Earth and the moon itself is so huge. So 5 degrees can cause the moon to be really on top there or really below there, right? So that is how the moon orbits around the Earth. Now, to have that strange orbit of the moon around the Earth, then calculation shows that the angle of collision is not heads-on, but it must be a glancing collision, a glancing blow. Because if it is a head-on collision, then this planet will be destroyed and Earth will be destroyed, and then the Earth will be ejected, will be pushed the other way, right? And there will be no moon. If there's any debris, then the debris will just fly off towards that direction, towards that direction. But if it's a glancing blow like that, if it hits and the Earth is moving, and then this planet Mars, right, the size of a planet Mars, we just say Mars, this planet, right, the size of planet Mars, hit it at the side, just at the side, and therefore the debris that is being pushed, ejected to a space, will form at that angle and move up, and then coalesce itself, right, into a moon, and then it will continue its orbit around Earth at that angle. So that collision, right, must be at that angle. So they calculated that, right? So that's number two. Now, if you have a collision between two planets right now, where the planets are all already solid hard, formed very hard. For example, you hit Mars with Earth, right? Take Mars and you hit it, and both are already solid planet. You hit it, even at that angle, you will have both planets being destroyed. Destroyed to smithereens, small boulders, right? Utterly destroyed. There's no more planets. Both of them finished. If it happens right now, when both of these celestial objects are already, the surface already solid hard, right? Now, when you have the collision at an early time, when the Earth is still, you know, very hot, right? The surface is plastic in nature. It means that it's like plasticine, right? It's a molten lava, right? It's not a solid, what do you call it, solid rock. And then you have this, another planet is also hot, right? Where the surface is plastic, it's not really hot. So when they hit at an angle at a very high speed, what happened will be that these two planets, and this has been modeled, by computers, the Earth and the Moon, because sorry, the Earth and this planet, this classic planet, which what do you call it? These astronomers just give a name as Thea, right? Just like this Thea. So when it has an impact, right, it hit each other, because both of them molten lava is very plastic, right? And it's already hot. So therefore, the interior, sorry, the core of Thea, which is that planet, the heating planet, that core, because it's small, that core sink into the Earth. Sink into Earth. Earth also has a core. It had a core, but that original core was small. Now, when you have the core of Thea sinking into the center of the Earth, because everything's molten lava, so it sank into the center of the Earth, and then it fused with Earth core. Ultimately, Earth has a bigger core because it's a combination of two cores. Now, this is a very fortunate thing. This is something that without a bigger core for Earth, life most probably cannot exist on its surface. Now, why is it? Why the core is very important? Because our Earth, right, we have a bigger core. All planets have cores, right? This core rotates. It rotates, okay? You have this core as solid metal. Now, a question was asked last week, why the core was solid metal, whereas outside the core is what they call liquid metal. Liquid metal, not solid. Now, why is the core solid and then outside is liquid? The answer is that the gravitational pull of Earth itself compressed the core to such a state that the iron, that the metal of that core cannot be fluid. It cannot flow because the gravitational pull is so strong, everything is compressed to that particular core. So therefore, that molten core actually cannot be molten, but it becomes solid because of that pressure. Very high pressure. And that is why the center of the Earth is a solid metal. But then after a certain distance from really the center of the Earth, right, the gravitational pull, right, the pressure is not that high enough, right, it's not that strong enough to force metal to become liquid, even though it was a very high temperature. You know, the core of the earth is about 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Celsius. No metal can exist in a solid form at 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Celsius. No metal can exist. But earth is a solid metal because of that pressure. Much like, you know, if you dive into the ocean at the depth of the ocean, at the, what do you call it, the bottom of the ocean, at the depth of 8 kilometers, 10 kilometers, where the pressure is very, very high, and then you have a volcanic vent, right, that spew out water, right, at a superheated temperature of 120, 130 degrees Celsius. Now, we know that water becomes gas, right, at 100 degrees Celsius. But 120 degrees Celsius, under the at the bottom of the ocean, right, at the volcanic vent, this 120 degrees water remains in liquid form, cannot become gas. It doesn't bubble up, becomes gas, even though it's at 120 degrees Celsius. Why? Because of the pressure from the water itself that forced the gas, right, to becomes liquid, right? The molecules of the water being compressed together to become liquid. So they call it a superheated water, 120 degrees Celsius, right? You boil it on earth, on surface of the earth, then it becomes gas, right? Much like, you know, if you boil water on the surface of the mountain, sorry, on mountain top, 4,000, 5,000 degrees Celsius, right? You know that water boils, water becomes gas at 100 degrees Celsius, but if you boil the water on the, what do you call it, mountain top, right, where the pressure is lower, then the water will boil at a lower temperature. 80 degrees Celsius, the water can boil. Why? Because not much pressure, right, pushing on the water for it to become gas. So it's like that, right? So the core of the earth becomes solid because of all the pressure. And beyond that, the pressure is not that strong. So the metal return back to its original form, because it's very, very high temperature, 2,000 degrees Celsius, 3,000 degrees Celsius, it becomes a liquid metal. Now you have a solid metal in the middle, right? And you have a liquid metal around it. And this solid metal is moving, right? And because it's moving, this solid metal is brushing, right? It's brushing on the liquid metal around it. The metal and metal brushing, it forms magnet. It becomes a magnet. So it forms a magnetic field. And so therefore, this magnetic field that we can see right now, right? We use it right now in the form of compass. That's a magnetic field. It's because of that solid core that rotates around that liquid metal. Now, in fact, almost all planets in the solar system, they have this solid core metal that rotates around the liquid metal, right? And they have the magnetic field. However, right, the magnetic field for Earth compared to Venus, compared to Mercury, compared to Mars, we don't talk about the giant planet, because giant planets, they are so huge, their magnetic fields are very, very big. But all these 4 planets, right, Mercury is so small, okay, we can discount it. Mars and Earth, they are most similar. And then we have, what they call it, Venus and Earth are most similar. Mars is small, so you can discount Mars. But these 2 planets almost similar, but within these 2, Earth has a stronger magnetic field around it. Now, magnetic field is very important, because why? Because the magnetic field actually serves as a shield for the planet from all those harmful radiation from the sun. The sun emits alpha particle, right? Beta particle and gamma rays. Gamma rays is basically electron, right? Gamma rays is basically photon, right? A very high photon, very high energy photon. Alpha particles is basically the neutron and proton. And then we have beta particles, which is basically electron. Now, all these rays, gamma rays, or these particles, they are very harmful for creatures, especially for us, because we have a very soft body. our cells consist of DNAs that can be rearranged easily. You can hit it here, hit it there, and then the molecules of that DNA, right, rearrange, and then you have a cancer cell. You know, that's how cancer form, because somehow or rather, the what do you call it, the DNA has been knocked here and there by harmful radiations. So those who are exposed more to harmful radiations, for example, nuclear radiations, right, and they're working with radioactivity, or the what do you call it, regularly conduct X-rays, experiments, so forth. Their bodies are exposed to all these kind of rays. They are prone to cancers. Okay? Just like, you know, if you expose our skin too much to the sun, and the sun produce ultraviolet rays, ultraviolet rays has a very high energy. It can easily, you know, rearrange a little bit of that DNA on our skin cells, and therefore our skin cells will die or will become cancerous, right? So these rays from the sun actually kill creatures that are based on water. On Earth, we creatures are based on water, very fragile, right? The cells can be destroyed anytime. But Allah SWT created for Earth that strong magnetic field because of this fusion between these two cores, right? And we can't find it in Venus. And so therefore, the magnetic field of the Earth is very strong. All those harmful radiations that goes to the Earth, they will be deflected by the magnetic field. Instead of going straight to Earth's surface, they'll be deflected up and they'll be deflected down according to the, what do you call it, the magnetic field of the Earth from north to south, north to south. So they goes up and they goes down, right? Most of it goes up, less of it goes down, right? So because most of it goes up, and therefore when it goes back, because the magnetic field is like that, it must originate from surface. So when it goes down towards the Earth at its north pole, all these radiations, they interact with our atmosphere, the molecules of our atmosphere, the oxygen, right, the ozone layer, the nitrogen. So when they react with the gases in our atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen, right, they produce light, beautiful lights. And this light is what we call as aurora. So that's why we can see only aurora on North Pole and a little bit on the South Pole. We can't see it at the equator because this magnetic, what do you call it, radiations and particles, so these harmful particles, right, they were deflected by the magnetic field to go up and react with the atmosphere. And because the gamma rays, they react with the atoms of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and they produce light, green light. Most of it green light because they interact with nitrogen more. Sometimes red light because they interact with red or blue light. They interact with what do you call it, other gases, oxygen or argon, all right, or neon light or neon gas, whatever the rare gases on Earth, in the Earth atmosphere. So they goes up there. So those people who lived a very, very long time, right, on the northern part of the hemisphere, near to the North Pole, they are more exposed to harmful radiation from the sun, and the probability for them to get skin cancer is higher, right? As much as those who lived, you know, on the equator for a long time, they are exposed to skin cancer. The higher chance for them to be exposed to skin cancer. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with His infinite mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create that, we call it survival of the fittest mechanism, we call it, right? The adaptation mechanism that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for us. So therefore, those people who lived in the equator, where we are exposed to the sun, direct to the sun, even not the harmful particles, right, but the direct radiation heat from the sun and the ultraviolet light from the sun, right, these people, they develop dark skin. this dark skin, right? Let's see, what's the name of it? Melanin, I think. It's called melanin. This dark skin, it reduces the absorption of the ultraviolet light. It becomes like a shield for the cell, right? From all those harmful ultraviolet light and also infrared light. So they become, immune to all these things. So they will not get skin cancer easily. In fact, because of that melanin inside on their skin itself, because it's dark, right? It produces more, what do you call it? I forgot the name itself, but it causes the skin to be more supple, more, what do you call it, is tougher, right? The skin is tougher, and therefore they are less prone to wrinkles. And that's why you look at those African peoples, even when they reach the old age of 70, 80, might be 90 years old, you can hardly see any wrinkles on their face. Right? They have wrinkles, but not so much if you compare to all those Caucasians, those Westerners, those white skins, right? Who reach at that age, they will like a grumpy old man, something like that, right? Because they have less melanin and they are less that shield from the radiation from the sun. But those people, they live in the northern hemisphere, right? They are also shielded from all those harmful radiations that come, right, flowing down to the Earth's surface and cause aurora. They are shielded from that because why? Because the weather is so cold, so therefore they put on so many layers of clothing. Even their face, they covered it. So actually they're protected from those harmful radiations. See how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I mean, plan everything. So beautiful, right? All these are from the mercy of Allah, the infinite mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, so going back to this formation of the moon itself. So then we have, because it is plastic, both of them are plastics, easily for the core of Thea to sink into the Earth interior and fuse together with the Earth core and form a bigger core. And what happened to the rest of the Thea's body and Earth body? They actually try to separate itself because it's a glancing blow. So they try to separate itself. This is a model, right, from computer simulation, from all the mathematics that they model it. So they form like the two, like very, very thick liquid lah, right? Trying to be separated, but then they could not separate themselves. Then they fall back to each other, right? And when they fall back to each other, Thea and Earth fuse together, and Earth becomes a little bit bigger. But some of the debris that being ejected to space, right? They could not travel far from this bigger planet, and they were pulled back by the gravitational pull of this bigger planet. Earth started smaller and then becomes bigger because of the collision, and the gravity becomes stronger. So therefore, all this debris, right, being captured inside a ring, just like Saturn's ring right now, that we can see it. And then slowly after millions of years, maybe about 100 million years, 200 million years, right? They form together, they hit each other, they will be pulled by each other's gravity, and ultimately they become the moon. And that is why the moon has no core. It has no metallic core. It's very strange, right? If you look at the moon of Mars, they have core because they actually form outside Mars. If you look at the moon of Jupiter, they have core. Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter, they have core. It has core. Io, it has core, right? But the moon itself has no core. So the moon has no gravitational, there has no magnetic field around it. And it is very, very fortunate because, the moon does not have any magnetic field. It does not interfere with the magnetic field of the Earth. If the moon, imagine if the moon has a magnetic field, and this magnetic field of the moon slices through the magnetic field of the Earth, it will create loopholes, holes, just like cheese, just like when a ship passes through the water, there are ripples, right? So these ripples of the magnetic lines can can become doors for all those radiations from the sun to just penetrate into that magnetic field and hit us on Earth, and life will be more miserable. See, subhanAllah, Allah has arranged everything nicely for us. This moon is actually, it's a blessing for us. So the formation of the moon is actually a blessing. Allah caused this collision, right? It's a very, very fortunate. Scientists call it as a coincidence. It's a one in a, maybe in a trillion chances, maybe one in a billion chances, right? That this collision can happen, because you can't find this collision in other 7 other planets of this solar system. And it might be there were a lot of collisions before, but both planets, right, both objects were destroyed. But Earth survived and becomes bigger and stronger. And the moon actually, right, has a move in at an angle, and there's no magnetic field. So the moon has no core, no magnetic field, and therefore the moon is dead, inert, right? It is not changing. Whatever collisions you have there, it will last for billions of years. When you look up there, you have these craters. Some of the craters are 4 billion years old. Imagine, nothing changed on the moon's surface. Whereas on Earth, it's very dynamic. Nothing can last, even for 100 million years. Because why? Because the Earth is alive. We can't say that much on Mars, because so far we can see Mars is much like the moon, right? There's not much movement, right? There might be some little bit of Mars quakes, but not as huge or as big or as strong as earthquakes. Now, earthquakes is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Volcano is a blessing from Allah. You say, oh, volcano is something, is a test from Allah, it is a disaster, earthquake disaster. So see how many people killed, right? We have tsunamis. Yeah, we look at from a very small angle, right? Yeah, it is a disaster. But you look from a wider scope, all these earthquakes and all these volcanoes, they cause the earth to be alive. How much so? Because if the earth, imagine if the earth does not have earthquakes, the surface of the earth will be exhausted by all the plants after millions or billions of years, right? The surface of the earth will be exhausted by the plants. It's much like, okay, I give you a finite size of food, and then you eat the food and there's no more food. So you're going to die, right? But if I continue to supply the food to you, you will continue to enjoy, you're going to continue to live. Okay, so that is how earthquake is the function of the earthquake. The earthquake actually refresh the surface of the earth. The surface of the earth has been depleted by all the resources, minerals and so forth, by plants, by whatever, by wind, by air, right? By what other factors lah. So when earthquake happens, right? Earthquake push up new materials from the earth interior and then submerge, right, the surface, the old surface down onto the earth. So it is a form of renewal. So it push up new materials so that the old materials will sink back on earth. Right? And then after it push up here, and then it goes down. Of course, this pushing up and pushing down, right? Of course, it causes a lot of vibrations, right? Violent vibrations for us, right? That's why all we call it as earthquakes. But earthquakes is a natural phenomenon, and earthquakes so far, right? So far, we know that earthquakes is the number of earthquakes actually is constant from 100 years back, as from as early as we start our record of earthquakes until now. The frequency of earthquakes every year remains the same, right? It is not that the earthquakes is getting more and more frequent. We thought that the earthquakes getting more frequent because earthquakes happened, right, in places where there are people. People have built cities in places where there were no cities before. And those places, they were places where earthquake happens. So when earthquake happens, it becomes great news. So we thought that earthquakes happen more and more often, and so therefore the Yawmul Qiyamah is getting nearer, because the Prophet ﷺ said one of the signs of Yawmul Qiyamah is that there will be more earthquakes. So people thought, oh, it's going to be the end of time because there are more earthquakes. Actually, it's for just our own perception, right? The real number of quakes actually remain the same, and there are thousands of earthquakes every year. At any one time, there are earthquakes, but it is so small, right? It is very low and deep inside the earth that we cannot feel it. Only very sensitive instrument can record it. So a lot of earthquakes actually. So earthquakes actually renew Earth, right? Renew Earth. As much as volcano renew the Earth. Because volcano is just like a dark, right, a vent that bring up all the new materials from the Earth interior, all the minerals and fresh things, and then spew up, right, over the Earth's surface and make the land fertile. So it's a fertile line around volcanoes. So all these are blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the question is, right, why aren't there any volcanoes and so far violent quakes on Mars? You don't talk about the moon. Moon is very a dead place. There's no quakes, no moonquakes, no volcano, of course, right? No volcano. So all those dark patches, they are not volcanoes, right? They are molten, what do you call it, surface of the moon because of collisions by all those asteroids that bombarded the moon. So it's not volcano it's not lava from the interior of the moon itself. But can't find that on Mars. Venus, we still cannot really know that much because Venus is shrouded by thick atmosphere. We still are discovering Venus. But Earth is a very violent place, a very vibrant place. Why? The question is why? And there's a very, very strong suspicion that you can't find this sort of activities, volcanoes erupting now and then quakes, right? Now and then happening thousands of times every year on planet Venus. You can't find it. Most probably. Why? Because Venus does not have a moon, and we have a moon. Another thing is another benefit of the moon. Now, why moon caused the Earth to be alive? Simple answer is that the moon moves around the Earth, right? And as it moves around the Earth, it pulls water on the Earth, on Earth's surface. That's why we have tide, high tide, low tide, right? Because moon has also gravitational point is quite huge, actually, the moon itself. And it does not just pull water, it pulls also Earth interior, the magma, right? The lava inside the Earth interior and the surface of the Earth itself is being pulled by the moon. So when you have all these things moving, right, the moon caused the surface of the Earth, right, to push here and there, to go here and there, and then as they move here and there, they cause cracks on the surface of the Earth itself. And when these cracks happen, right, you have like jigsaw puzzles. They start to small pieces, right, or huge pieces on the Earth's surface, try to, because of the Earth, because of the moon is pulling, and so it hits here and hits there. We have earthquakes. Earthquakes is basically the tectonic plate. We call it tectonic plate. We call all these puzzles, jigsaw puzzles on the Earth's surface. They will interlock between each other, and then after that, somehow or other, because they push here and there, they push here and there, somehow the lock just give way. When the lock gives away, you have earthquakes. Sometimes they move down and then they still move up, right? So we have earthquakes. So the moon actually caused a lot. Actually, no, sorry. Let me put it this way. The moon is the main factor for earthquakes and also volcanoes because of that gravitational pull of the moon itself. So the moon caused the Earth to be alive. Take out the moon from the Earth will be a dead planet. There'll be no much quakes, there'll be not much volcanoes. See, that is a function of the moon. Subhanallah. And the moon has been around for 4.5 billion, almost 4.5 billion years, and has been around since the formation of the first cell or the first animal. So therefore, right, our lives, all the earth creatures are being tuned to the moon's phases, the moon's movement. We have been tuned to that. In the ocean, right? We have creatures that, for example, the Great Barrier Reefs, right? They spawn, right? They release their whatever, their eggs or whatever they call it, with spawning lah. When the moon was a full moon, how did you know? Did they observe? Do they observe the moon? No, of course they're just creatures, animals. They don't observe the moon. They are reefs, right? But how do they know? They are tuned to that. And so you see a lot of animals on Earth, right? They are tuned to the moon. We ourselves are tuned to the moon. The proof of it, we have, right? For us humans, we have among the females, we have called menstruation, the menses. The menses is the monthly occurrence, and it does not follow the solar year. It follows the lunar year. Because the solar year, the month for the solar year, January, February, is artificial division of people. But the actual movement of the moon itself, right, that caused the menstruation of some mammals. The Homo families, we can put it that way. Okay, so moon has a very, very vital and great role in our lives. And that is why the moon was formed very, very early on, right? Because the moon caused the earth to be dynamic. And because of the moon was there, right, the earth can progress to produce life on it. And so therefore scientists now discovered the early part of the earth, and then scientists break up the early periods of the earth formation to certain periods, which inshallah we will discuss next week, inshallah. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and let's see if there is any question. Yes, there is. There are two questions there. I've heard stories of Neil Armstrong, the man who landed on the moon, that he heard the sound of the azan when he was on the moon. Any verification of this? No, that is a total fabrication. You cannot verify it's a fabrication. It is a false. It's just, for Muslims to feel good. A very simple proof. What is the proof? The moon has no air. It is a dead, what do you call it, object. No air at all. Because it's small, there's no air. Sound needs air, right? Sound needs air to propagate. We hear sound because there's air. We can't hear sound in space because there's no air. So therefore, we can't hear anything on the surface of the moon. The only thing you can hear is from the speaker inside that astronaut suit. And if, let's say, they play azan, right, to that astronaut, the astronaut can hear the azan, but outside, no, you can't hear anything, right? So it's just a wishful thinking. It's been around for so many decades, this false story. So no azan being heard there. No, if Neil Armstrong really heard azan, right, and suddenly, wow, suddenly there's an azan on moon surface, he will be very scared. Now, there is somebody, there are Muslims on Earth, on the moon. Now this is very, very dangerous. So then the scientists will be baffled. How come there are Muslims on moon, or there are jinns? We can't verify there are jinns on the moon itself. So it's not, the story's not there. Neil Armstrong died as a non-Muslim, right? Never become a Muslim. Question number 2, how do we understand the hadith on earthquakes? This is the signs of the end of times. One of the signs of the end of time is earthquakes becomes more frequent. Things can happen towards the end of time. Dajjal can appear. This all against what they call it, what we know from science, right? There'll be more. We do not know actually what is actually really under the earth. Is that there can be more activities, right? There'll be another celestial objects being captured by the earth itself, or the moon can collide with another objects, and there'll be a violent reaction. So therefore the earth will have that, that repercussion of that violent reaction, and so there'll be more earthquakes. It might be that, it might be other things we do not know of, right? So that's just part of the what we can explain right now, what I think is a possible thing that can happen. Question number 3, what does the moon have to do with menstrual cycle? In a year, women have 12 menstruations, and that coincides with the 12 orbit of the moon around the earth, in one orbit of the earth around the sun. So it has to do with that, right? Of course, you know, sometimes it's not regular because it's just not because of the moon, because of the biological things inside the woman's body, right? The hormones, this and that, the stress level, there's a lot of things lah. But basically, right, why we have 12, why not 13? Because of that, right? So it can be at most 15 days. Why not more than that? Because half of the moon cycle is 15 days, right? And most is 7 days, 8 days, because a quarter of the moon's orbit around the Earth is about 7 to 8 days. So that is being actually accepted by all scientists, biologists, and so forth, right? That is the fact of moon on Mars. Okay, so no more question. Okay, thank you very much. Inshallah, we continue next week. Inshallah, next week will be on the 12th. Then the week after that will be on the 19th, and the 19th will be on the eve of Hari Raya Haji. Of course, there's no class lah. We all want to celebrate Hari Haji lah. I think Malays will celebrate like what lah Hari Haji after all the lockdown yang Hari Raya Puasa, Raya Sakan yang they said it, whatever it is. Okay, so inshallah we're going to meet next week. Thank you very much. We end with Tasbih Kafara and Suratul Asr. سبحانك ربك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Thank you very much. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.